The story opens in a workshop. Through a window, the camera drifts outside toward a small treehouse glowing faintly in the distance. The view then shifts back inside, closing in on a dollhouse resting on a work table. The perspective narrows further, zooming into one of its tiny bedrooms. Morning comes. Steve Graham moves through the quiet house, waking his two children. His teenage son, Peter, stirs reluctantly, while his 13-year-old daughter, Charlie, is nowhere to be found. Steve eventually discovers her sleeping in the chilly treehouse outside, bundled up and withdrawn. They are preparing to attend the funeral of Ellen Taper Lee, Steve's 78-year-old mother-in-law. At the service, Annie Graham, Steve's wife and a meticulous artist who builds miniature dioramas, stands at the podium. She speaks a eulogy for her mother. While Annie talks, Charlie sits off to the side. She makes her strange clucking sound under her breath and scribbles an odd drawing instead of paying attention. That night, Annie tucks Charlie into bed and tries to speak gently about Ellen. Charlie reveals something unsettling. Her grandmother always wished she had been born a boy. Annie is caught off guard and even more disturbed when Charlie asks who will take care of her now that Ellen is gone. Later that evening, while Annie looks through an old family album in her studio, she glimpses what looks like a ghostly image of her mother watching her. At school the next day, Charlie witnesses a bird slam into the classroom window and fall dead. She calmly walks outside, picks up the body, and severs its head with a pair of scissors. From across the street, a strange woman waves at her in an unsettlingly friendly way. Annie, still haunted by memories, begins reading about ghosts and apparitions. Meanwhile, Steve receives a call from the cemetery. Ellen's grave has been disturbed. He decides not to tell Annie, worried the truth will break her even more. Later, Annie tells Steve she's going to see a movie, but in reality, she drives to a grief support group. Night has already fallen by the time she arrives. When it's her turn to share, Annie admits her mother struggled with severe mental illness, including dissociative identity disorder and dementia. Back at home, Charlie notices a flickering light moving strangely across her bedroom. Around the same time, Annie gets a call from Sylvia Archer, a gallery owner pressing her about her unfinished dioramas. One of them, ironically, includes a piece of Ellen. Not long after, Peter asks Annie if he can go to a party. He admits he's hoping to see Bridget, a girl he likes from school. Annie pushes back, asking if it's truly a school event. When Peter insists it is, she makes him take Charlie with him. That night, Charlie has a vision. She sees her grandmother standing in flames, surrounded by fire. Shaken, she makes her clucking sound again. Afterwards, she quietly tells Annie she wants Ellen back. Annie, unnerved, orders Peter to take her along to the party despite his protests. At the house, the party is filled with teenagers. Many of the girls wear long, oversized flannel shirts. Peter quickly ditches his sister so he can get high with Bridget and her friends. Left alone, Charlie finds a chocolate cake on the counter. Unaware it contains nuts, she eats a slice. Moments later, her throat begins to swell. She's allergic, who instantly realizes what's happening. He scoops her up, carries her to his car, and speeds off toward the hospital, racing down a lonely country road. Charlie leans out of the window, desperate to breathe. Ahead, an animal suddenly darts into the road. Peter swerves sharply to avoid it. In that instant, Charlie's head slams into a utility pole. The impact is fatal. She is decapitated. Peter sits frozen after the accident, his face blank, unable to process what just happened. Hours pass before he numbly drives home, still in shock. At dawn, Annie walks outside and discovers the unthinkable. Charlie's headless body lying in the back seat of the car. Her horrified scream echoes through the house. The family soon holds a funeral for Charlie. Grief hangs heavy. Steve quietly flips through Charlie's sketchbook, full of unsettling drawings. Peter, drowning in guilt, smokes marijuana one day after school and spirals into a panic attack before biking home in the dark. Annie, meanwhile, isolates herself. She spends hours sitting silently in the driveway, locked inside her car, sobbing alone. One evening, Annie drives to her grief support group but cannot bring herself to go in. She sits in the lot, ready to turn around, when another member, Joan, notices her. Joan gently approaches and introduces herself. After Annie reveals she recently lost her daughter, Joan confides that she too lost both a child and a grandson. The shared pain sparks a fragile bond between them. Clumsy attempt at intimacy, but Annie rejects him. Instead of sleeping in her bed, she retreats to the treehouse where Charlie once stayed. At night, Peter is haunted by strange sounds. He hears Charlie's trademark clucking noise and sees what he thinks is her ghost in the corner of his room. But when he blinks, it's only his hoodie hanging in the shadows. Annie later visits Joan at her apartment. During their conversation, Annie reveals a disturbing memory. Years ago, during one of her sleepwalking episodes, she poured paint thinner all over herself and her children. When she came to, she was standing there with matches in her hand, ready to strike. That incident, she admits, permanently fractured her relationship with her kids. Steve, meanwhile, walks in on Annie working on a new miniature diorama. This one chillingly recreates the exact scene of Charlie's death. At dinner that night, Annie suddenly lashes out at Peter, accusing him of being responsible for his sister's death. Peter fights back, reminding her that she was the one who forced Charlie to go to the party in the first place. The tension between them is unbearable. One day, Annie bumps into Joan again at an art supply store. Joan appears eager and animated, telling Annie that she recently attended a seance that changed her life. She explains how a medium helped her contact her dead grandson, Louis, and even taught her how to perform the ritual herself. Joan shows Annie a chalkboard in her car trunk, claiming Louis can write messages on it during these seances. Intrigued but hesitant, Annie agrees to witness the ritual. At Joan's apartment, Annie watches as Joan appears to contact Louis. A glass moves on the table, and chalk scratches words across the board. Overcome, Annie can't deny what she sees. Joan insists Annie can do the same thing. She only needs an item that belonged to the deceased, a chant, and her family present in the house. On her drive home, Annie hears Charlie's familiar cluck echo inside the car. That night, Annie dreams of ants crawling across Peter's face. She follows the swarm and finds her son's lifeless body. Jolting awake, she realizes she's standing over his bed in another sleepwalking trance. Peter wakes, frightened, and asks why she seems so afraid of him. Annie blurts out that she never wanted to be his mother, and even tried to miscarry when she was pregnant. Suddenly, she wakes again. It was a dream within a dream. Unable to resist, Annie performs the summoning ritual Joan taught her. She uses Charlie's sketchbook as the personal object and recites the chant while Steve and Peter sleep. Excited and convinced she has brought Charlie back, she drags them into another seance. The energy in the room shifts violently. Annie appears to be overtaken by Charlie's spirit, speaking with her daughter's voice. Peter screams in terror as Steve throws water on Annie to break the trance. At school the next day, Peter sees the same strange glowing light that once appeared in Charlie's room. When he glances at his reflection in the glass, his mirrored face grins back at him with an expression he himself isn't making. At home, Steve confronts Annie. He accuses her of feeding Peter's fears by pushing the idea of spirits. Annie, overwhelmed, wrecks her art studio in a fit of rage, snapping when she accidentally destroys a small chair from one of her models. Her gallery continues to pressure her for work, leaving her even more desperate. Soon, Charlie's sketchbook begins filling with eerie new drawings by itself. Peter wakes one night and sees Charlie's spirit standing in the corner. Her head falls off, transforming into a ball that rolls across the floor. Invisible hands suddenly choke him as he thrashes on his bed. Terrified, Peter blames Annie, insisting she attacked him while sleepwalking again. Annie begs him not to tell Steve and instead warns Peter that something truly evil is haunting them. She points out a strange marking above his bed, similar to the symbol Charlie once saw after the bird struck her classroom window. Realizing the entity she called upon is dangerous, Annie throws the sketchbook into the fireplace. But as the pages catch fire, her own arm begins to burn, as if magically linked to the book. Screaming, she yanks it back out, saving both herself and the journal. She rushes back to Joan for answers, but Joan isn't home. Through the window, Annie sees disturbing objects, ritual tools, symbols, and a photograph of Peter placed inside a triangle. Among them is a symbol Annie recalls from her mother's belongings. Annie begins piecing it together. The emblem belongs to Paimon, a demon king. Looking deeper into her family's history, Annie uncovers photographs of Joan and her mother Ellen together. Both were members of a coven dedicated to summoning Paimon into a male body to gain wealth and power. In horror, Annie finds her mother's decapitated corpse hidden in the attic of her own house. At school, Peter hears Joan yelling at him from across a fence, chanting, "I expel you." Later in class, Charlie's clucking sound echoes again. Suddenly, Peter slams his head repeatedly into his desk as if possessed, breaking his nose and screaming in panic. Meanwhile, Annie stands outside in the pouring rain, clutching Ellen's scrapbook. In a surreal moment, Peter's bedroom window vanishes from the side of the house behind her. Steve eventually drives Peter home. Annie meets them at the car, strangely dry despite the storm. She tells Steve about the corpse in the attic, now missing its head. She also shows him photos of Ellen and Joan wearing the symbol of Paimon. Annie explains their family curse began when she tried contacting Charlie, and insists the only way to protect Peter is to burn Charlie's sketchbook. Steve refuses, convinced Annie has lost her mind and desecrated Ellen's grave herself. Desperate, Annie throws the book into the fire, expecting to die. Instead, Steve erupts into flames and burns alive before her eyes. Upstairs, Peter wakes to the sight of Annie crawling unnaturally on the walls and ceiling, her body controlled by something else. He flees his room, but the attic ladder pulls up out of reach. When it lowers again, Annie pursues him inside. Peter retreats to the attic and locks himself in. Annie slams her head violently against the door, then suddenly appears inside. She floats in the air, gripping a wire, and slices her own head off. Peter's overwhelmed by the sight of his mutilated mother, Ellen's missing body, and several nude cult members silently watching. Terrified, he leaps out the window. His body lies still, but a glowing light drifts into him. Slowly, Peter rises, no longer himself. Drawn toward the treehouse, Peter follows as Annie's headless body floats inside. Within the structure, a group of cultists kneel in worship. At the center stands a statue crowned with Charlie's decapitated head. The headless corpses of Annie and Ellen bow before it. Joan steps forward, calling Peter by Charlie's name, then declares that Charlie's spirit has finally been given the male host required by Paimon. A crown is placed on Peter's head. The coven cheers, praising the arrival of their king. The story ends with the image of a miniature treehouse, inside which dolls reenact this twisted coronation. Peter standing as Paimon, surrounded by the worshippers, with the headless bodies of his mother and grandmother kneeling before him. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel for amazing recaps. Thank you for watching.